It's Angli Et Nex here again, and today I wanted to show you just some updates that I have done to my Master of Flame control wizard. There's really not a whole lot of changes other than with the Renegade build that I showcased earlier on. I was more of a hybrid, trying to do DPS and buff at the same time. But since the loadout system has come out, it's become where I basically have one buff build, and then I went full thaumaturge for a DPS build. So I'm going to show you the updates to the full buff build that I did, and it has a few tweaks because it is still somewhat of a hybrid, but I will show you the two or three couple of tweaks that you can use to go full buff with this build. Other than that, it buffs really awesome. We've actually found with the group that I run with, and it's really not even a group, it's usually just me and my buddy Bladaga, as you guys have seen on past videos and past streams. He runs on his Great Weapon Fighter, and I buff him to the high heavens, and he's gotten to the point where he's only just a shade over 13,000 item level, and his at-wills are hitting for like 800,000, a million, just from me buffing. It's not even with a cleric, so that's been kind of the crazy thing about this build. But let's hop into it here. I'll go over gear. Hasn't changed a whole lot other than just trying to get things. This guy's ready to go. I'm in its double refinement this weekend on Xbox. I just ran out of Pres wards, so this guy is ready to go to Mythic. Really super excited about that. But for me, I am still using the drown weapons, but I am pushing through the River District to try and get River District weapons. I'm not sure which ones I'm going to get first. Aboleth is really enticing to me, but at the same time I play more of my Renegade build than I do the full DPS build. But I'm still using the drown weapons just for extra survivability on my account, so I heal myself pretty regular. I am also using a Transcendent Bark Shield, so that helps out a lot. Then obviously, you guys can see I'm using a lightning. I'm using, I believe it's just a perfect lightning, but the reason I'm using the lightning isn't for the damage, it's for the cooldowns that I get, because every tick of your DOTs as a control wizard has a chance to send off a chain of lightning, which then reduces your cooldowns. So I switched to my thaumaturge build and put on a Fey Touched, and yes, I did more damage because thaumaturge does more damage, but my counter powers were so much slower. It took longer for them to come back up just because I wasn't having the added cooldown from the lightning. And then the difference in damage was minuscule between the Fey Touched and the lightning, just because I was able to get more powers off in a dungeon run than I was with the Fey Touched. So that's the reason I'm using the lightning currently, and I have a trans Fey Touched, and that thing is awesome. I love it. But for the control wizard, especially as a buff control wizard, I want to keep those buffs just coming as fast as I can possibly get them out there. So other than that, these are my base stats. I don't have anybody around me. I told all my guild mates, hey, I'm over here by the attack dummy, so don't come over here. I don't want any buff stats, anything like that. So these are all unbuffed stats, just basically what I'm running right now. Power, obviously I have the guild power boon and critical strike, so they're actually about even. I went pretty even. I think without the power boon I'm at like 15,000 power to the 14,000 crit. Armor pen, when I proc, I'm at 78 something % resistance ignored, so that'll be good for mod 12, since the damage resistance for mobs is a lot higher in mod 12, supposedly. We don't know for sure, but supposedly. Recovery is a little bit low, but I've been able to supplement pretty well with the lightning enchantment. And you're definitely going to go intelligence and charisma. Charisma gives you a crit chance. I haven't gone full intelligence yet, like most of the control wizards have, doing the owlbear belt to give you that boosted up crazy intelligence. But at the same time, I'm a buff control wizard, so my damage is minuscule. You know, I'm still usually third on the damage board as a buff, but it's minuscule compared to if I was trying to do full out damage. It would be a whole lot different. So I'm not using the owlbear belt to ramp up the intelligence quota there. But other than that, it's all basically just intelligence and charisma. In powers here, it's a little bit different on this build just because I did respec and change up some things since we had the loadout system, because I was trying to be an all-inclusive before the loadout system, so I had so many other things that I was trying to do. But Chill Strike, you could put 3 points in it, you could put 4 points in it if you wanted to. Just for me, I don't use it often enough on this build to put 4 points in it, but on my Thaumaturge build, I kind of have a AoE spec that I run, and then I switch a couple powers out on boss fights, and this is one of the powers that I put on. But same basic general powers as before. So Conduit of Ice, obviously 4 points. Oppressive Force, I put 3 points in, but it's not that big of a deal. Chilling Presence, put 4 points in there, and you'll see a change in the feats that you can change if you want to go full buff. So if you want to go full buff, you don't necessarily have to do Chilling Presence, but because this was my kind of pre-existing build that I just went off of before, I slotted Chilling Presence. But it's not, as you can see, I'm not even using it currently. But Chilling Cloud, 4 points in there. Shield, I just put points in there because I do dabble in PvP every now and again, and I was trying out both builds in PvP, so Shield is nice to have. But since we're a Master of Flame, Fanning the Flame is a big one. So 4 points in there. Fanning the Flame makes your Smolder proc, and it makes it spread, so it hits a lot harder. Icy Terrain, as you know, every control wizard and their mom, unless they're going single point, uses Icy Terrain and Conduit of Ice. Those are main staples to a control wizard build. So we use this. Combustive Action. Basically what this does is it makes your daily powers, when you use your dailies, it buffs your team, because it puts a debuff on the enemy, so it makes their damage resistance lowered to attacks for a short period of time, which is nice, and it boosts up AP gain. So you can keep going through your normal rotation, even on boss fights. You know, you use Ice Knife because it's single target, you know, so you don't necessarily need to use the Furious Immolation. But for mob groups, when it comes up, use Furious Immolation, suck them all to 1 point. You know, the fiery toilet bowl is what I like to call it. Just sucks them all to 1 point, and it damages every one of those guys that you hit and lowers their damage resistance to attacks. And it's not your attacks, it's from all attacks, so it buffs up your team as well. So that's kind of a big one. One that I had overlooked in my previous build. But like I said, it was kind of a hybrid before the loadout system came out. Scorching Burst, I have it slotted, but I never use it because Smolder procs constantly for me because I have enough critical that Smolder is going to proc. So you can use it to proc more, but I feel like getting my Chilling Cloud out there is actually a higher priority than trying to proc Smolder with Scorching Burst when Smolder is pretty much procking constantly anyway because I crit so much. And here's a big one. Big difference from the last build is Ray of Enfeeblement. I switched this on and off my mastery, my spell mastery button, which is RB for the Xbox. I switch it. I put on Conduit of Ice there through the main phase of the dungeon when we're attacking a lot of mobs, things like that. And then when we go to single point, is when I put on Ray of Enfeeblement on the mastery, because when you cast it on the target twice, you get double the buff. So it's not like it's wasted, you're actually doubling your buff when it's in the spell mastery button. And you get 2 charges, so you can just boop boop hit it twice and it's a double buff for your team. And then obviously Ice Knife, we have Ice Knife slotted just for those times of single point boss fights. You know, if you're running dungeons, you're running demonic encounters, whatever you're doing, and it hits really hard. I still hit million crit Ice Knives with my Renegade buffing build, quote unquote buffing build. So I've seen up to 1,000,007 running my Thaumaturge build, and that was basically just me running around the stronghold doing influence. Hit 1,000,007 Ice Knife. So that's unbuffed. That's just me me doing it with my Thaumaturge build. So I did put points in critical conflagration, but I'm not using it because it doesn't help anything for the team, so to speak. I crit enough even without it, so I don't necessarily need it. Icy Rays and Steel Time. I just put points in Steel Time because that used to be the old way to run these builds. Steel Time is awesome, but with one of the tweaks in the feats, you may want to run Steel Time, and you'll definitely run Ray of Enfeeblement. Just to help you, especially since you have it slotted to buff up your team a little bit more. But Icy Rays is just putting points there to build down. Nothing in Shard of Endless Avalanche, and then Furious Immolation is our last daily, and that's the Fiery Toilet Bowl, as I said before. So it sucks everybody in to a target area, and because of the other passive that we're using, it makes it so that it puts a debuff on the enemy, and every enemy hit by that daily gets the debuff, so it's nice. And then Swath of Destruction, that's a pretty obvious one, just because it helps Smolder spread and it increases your Smolder damage, and enemies affected by Smolder take more damage, where it doesn't say by who, by you, by them. It just says they take more damage. So that to me is they take damage from all sources, more damage from all sources if they're affected by Smolder. And then I have 4 points in Disintegrate, mostly just because that was slotted on my other build as well as on my hybrid build. But I don't really use it on this build just because I'm trying to mainly buff. And then pretty much nothing else in there. So let's jump over here to feats. Now you could do a couple of changes here in the heroic feats. You could take these 3 points out of toughness and bump them up into controlling action, because a lot of groups are running with Guardian Fighters now over Paladins. So if you have a controlled target, which a taunt, the mark from a Guardian Fighter is a control, you will gain you will gain more action points when using your powers on a control target. So that's one of the changes that you could do. And then you're doing critical hit chance, which is always nice. Encounter power cooldowns, and then area of effect powers deal 3% more damage, which we're not necessarily going for damage, but if you kind of have to fill out these points, so take a little bit of damage where you can take it. Arcane powers deal 3% more damage, and you could do this over the arcane damage. Your cold powers deal an additional 6% damage to targets affected by chill, but it's not necessary with this build, just because we're not going for damage. We're like a Z DPS is what they would call it in other games. We are there to buff the team. We do deal some damage, but like I said, I'm traditionally third on the damage board. If I'm second on the damage board, we have some issues. It's either a really, really, really weak group or someone DC'd or something like that. We're going to have some issues, and it's going to be a long dungeon. But at that point, I would most likely switch to the Thaumaturge build and actually be true DPS. So it's now that we have the loadout system, it makes it really nice so that you can speed up those dungeons. But whereas before, you would just get stuck. It's like it's just going to be a long dungeon because a buffing control wizard is second on the damage board. Whereas now I could just switch to my full damage build, when we're at the next campfire, and just start actually putting out true DPS. So I put points here basically just to build, just because we're running a buff. We're not unloading a bunch of points into intelligence. And so we're not worried about the damage that we're getting. So there's only 1 point in there. But when it comes to the Thaumaturge build, you're running pure damage. You want to put as many points in there as possible. And that would be the only time that I feel like human would be worth it, is because you can get that maxed out and still keep some other feat points where they're supposed to be instead of sacrificing some. So, and then here's a change too, also for a buff build. If you didn't want to go focus wizardry, because this is more about damage than it is about anything else, you could go with this one, which, like I said, this was kind of my little bit of a hybrid build from before, which I kind of was looking over it last night. I was like, oh, hey, there's still some tweaks that can be made. But this is one of the tweaks that I would definitely make. Your allies gain 3% increased stat ratings when they're around you. So that's just buffing everybody else around you just by them kind of being in your presence, which is nice. So that's one of the tweaks that I would make, and you could take out the focus wizardry because we're not worried about damage. You will see a pretty significant damage drop, but if you're not worried about damage and you're worried about buffing your team like I am, my buddy Bladaga, who you all have seen on his tank and on his great weapon fighter, we're not hurting for DPS. He can carry the whole team pretty much, so it's not that big of a deal to me to lose some damage, especially if I'm going to buff him up even higher, because that just makes him do more damage, which is my job with this build. So we'll run through these here really quick. The reason I went for Malevolent Surge over Tempest Magic is because A, we're not about dealing damage, and B, with our DOTs, I'm usually number 1 or number 2 on the list for enemies slain, because we put down so many DOTs that we usually end up getting the last hit as a control wizard, just because we're putting so many ticks down that we kill everything. Like, even though we're not dealing the main brunt of damage, we get the last hit, so we get the kill. So that increases our damage a little bit, which we're not really worried about. And then this is a big one for us. Targets affected by fanning of the flame have a 40% chance, when damaged by other attacks, to spread smolder to a nearby target. So any enemy you have affected by smolder, even your teammates hitting them, each attack by everybody is a 40% chance to spread smolder throughout the group. So that's huge. And it says when damaged by other attacks. So that also means that our DOTs from other attacks. So Icy Terrain, Conduit of Ice, and Ray of Enfeeblement. So there's 3 things right there just from us, from the control wizard, that has a chance to proc and spread smolder, let alone your teammates that are hitting them. And especially, you've got a combat hunter ranger in there that he does DOTs as well, and so each tick of his DOTs has a chance to keep spreading and spreading and spreading that smolder. So it's really nice and helps spread smolder throughout the group. And obviously spell twisting, everyone and their mom pretty much uses spell twisting when it comes to control wizards, just because of the cooldowns that you get from it. I'm not worried about really anything else other than cooldowns with this build. I want to crank out these powers as fast as possible, which is why I had made the comment earlier that my recovery is really low. But in light of that, I'm still getting my encounter powers off much faster than even with my other builds. So spell twisting helps out with that. And then critical power, just gaining action points. So action points is kind of a big deal for us now, because since we're using combustive action, we are debuffing and buffing our team by using our daily powers. Even though we're not worried about damage, we are using our daily powers in another sense to buff the team. So getting our action points up as fast as possible is just one more debuff, one more buff for your team that you can throw out there to help the team out. And your at wills deal 10% more damage within 20 feet of your target, which we are most of the time. We're right there in the face, just like most other builds. We drop Icy Terrain and stand in it, and crank out our powers from there. Where it's really fun is if you go oppressor, because everything is like permanently frozen pretty much, and so you can just stand there and just watch people die because they just sit there and freeze, and you're just melting them and they don't even get a chance to hit you. And then skip these 2 just because they're one's for Scorching Burst, which I don't actively use. You may actively use it, but I do not actively use it. And then this one is just basically giving you temporary hit points, which I don't deem necessary. If the tank's doing their job, we don't get hit very often. That's why we have the bark shield. If we do get hit, it doesn't hurt. When you critically strike, your allies gain 5% crit chance for 10 seconds. That's huge. So that can boost, like my buddy Bladaga is in like the 92 to 94% range. So that buffs him up to almost 100% range, because my DOTs crit all the time. Like my screen is filled with orange numbers, which you'll see here in a minute. This one, I Abyss of Chaos before, but that was before I realized that my crits were constant. So that's why I didn't take Uncertain Allegiance, because I was like, it's kind of wasted because my crit chance isn't high enough. But now realizing that my crit chance is high enough that my DOTs constantly crit, so this is constantly procced. So, and then we don't need to deal more damage, and we don't need the critical severity as a buff. So that's why we're not taking Phantasmal Destruction, but we are taking this one. So when you crit a foe, you have a 20% chance for you and your allies to gain combat advantage against it. So like I said, my DOTs crit constantly, so I'm giving my team critical hit chance, and I'm giving them combat advantage throughout the whole fight. Even if nobody is on the opposite side of me, on an enemy, we're gaining combat advantage just because of how often I crit with my DOTs. So this is constantly procced as well. And then here's another change that you could do. This was kind of from my hybrid build, and it's kind of useless right now because I'm not using Chilling Presence. So Chilling Presence, you just deal 10% more chance to crit. But you could do this one instead of the Chilling Advantage. Do Masterful Arcane Theft, Steal Time, and Ray of Enfeeblement. Deal 15% more damage to targets affected with chill, and an additional 6% for each stack of Arcane Mastery on you. So Ray of Enfeeblement is last in my rotation anyway, because it's either on my RB button for the Xbox or the B button for the Xbox. And so if it's on B, Conduit of Ice is on my Spell Mastery button. So I do Conduit of Ice, drop Icy Terrain. Once I see those crits start to proc, I hit Fanning the Flame to spread the smolder, and then I hit Ray of Enfeeblement. And so it's always last, so everyone is affected by chill at that point, so you're dealing more damage. And so that's the only benefit to that, especially since we're not running Chilling Presence right now. So that would be a no-brainer to move to that one. And then obviously everyone knows about Chaos Magic. When they see Fury or when they see Nexus, it's huge. People go, especially my buddy Bladaga goes ham when I just hear him go, ooh, Fury, or ooh, Nexus, you know. That 30% additional armor penetration and critical chance is nice. But then with Fury, 30% additional damage and 10% lifesteal. I mean, you can't lose with those as a DPS. So those are two beautiful things. And then Chaotic Growth I love because it keeps me alive. So, but other than that, boons are pretty much the same. Guild boons. This is all relative, as I've said before. So I'm using the power boon. I am now using the lifesteal boon since our guild has boosted that up pretty well. And then I'm currently using the XP boon because I still have a few more power points that I would like to put in places. So I'm trying to level up as quickly as possible. But you could either do the mount speed bonus or do the revive sickness. If you're playing endgame and you're going through MSVA or Fangbreaker or anything like that where you do have a tendency to die more often, revive sickness makes it really nice because it reduces the red skull down to 1 minute. So unless you're dying, constantly, more than once every minute, this is useless to you, and you should probably not be doing that end game content. Get a Bark Shield if you are dying that frequently, because Bark Shield basically gives you 4 chances to save your life at Transcendent. So that's why I use it, and we don't do PvP in my guild, so there's no PvP boons. But other than that, move to Sharandar, and basically everything is offense across the board, other than a couple healing things. So 400 power, 400 crit, action point gain, and then you could take the 20,000 arcane damage here, but I like the added survivability of being able to heal myself. When you're struck by a foe, you have a chance to heal yourself for 20,000 points, so that's why I take that one, because control wizards are basically walking around in jeans and a t-shirt. And then obviously Elvish Fury, whenever you kill a foe, you gain 135 power, and it stacks up to 30 times. So that's a pretty good boost, significant boost in power. And Dread Ring, I took critical over the power because my critical is a little bit lower. And then lifesteal over regen, because lifesteal is proccing in battle and regen is proccing out of battle. Resistance ignored is huge, so 3%. I mean, that's a difference maker right there. And then you could do the 20,000 necrotic, but I do this one because of what it does for both things. So you heal yourself for the 20,000 points, but then after that heal subsides, you gain 4,000 defense. So that's a huge boost for us to be able to ramp that up. Gives us extra defense and it heals ourselves, so we're just get a little bit tougher with that one. And then obviously Rampaging Madness, when you gain 50 stacks, you gain 4,000 power, 4,000 lifesteal, and 4,000 regen, which is easily maintainable throughout a fight. It is not hard to do that, especially with our DOTs. Those stacks come on really, really quick. Icewind Dale, combat advantage bonus, just because AoE resist is not useful for me because I try not to stand in any AoE or I might die. So combat advantage, stamina gain because you do kind of hop around a little bit. Critical severity, 2% critical severity. Then power based off of how much stamina guard you are missing. Like I said, we do hop around a little bit, so as your stamina bar depletes, you gain up to 2,000 power. And then for the same reasons as I kind of stated before, chance to gain 10% action points when killing a target. Because of our DOTs and getting the last hits, we get the kill. So we get 10% of our action points pretty often. And like I said, offense across the board. So 400 power, 1600 hit points, 400 critical, 1600 hit points. Combat advantage damage increased by 10%, which is huge because we're giving our team combat advantage through the whole fight. Now you regen stamina 5% faster. It's kind of better than the alternative, just because control resist is not a big thing in PVE. And then 10% damage against demons. It's just flat 10% extra damage, which is always useful. Tyranny campaign, 400 power, 400 crit, 400 armor pen, 400 lifesteal, and then if I ever want to beat my head against that wall to finish off these last two, they're going to go in critical severity. But I've got the one in critical severity, and this is where most DPS or most other classes are going to put their points. So, Maze Engine, lifesteal severity, 5% lifesteal severity, combat advantage bonus again, action points, and when striking a foe you gain 2,000 critical strike bonus for 6 seconds. So because my critical is so low, you can stack up that critical through your boons. Elemental Evil, 300 power, 2,000 max hit points, 4% lifesteal severity and 2,000 hit points, 400 critical and 2,000 maximum hit points, and then when taking damage you have a chance to heal for 24,000 points over a few seconds, and after that heal subsides you gain 1,000 critical strike for 10 seconds. So again, between the two ending boons of Maze Engine and Elemental Evil, that's an added 3,000 critical strike to your character. So that's pretty nice. Then I haven't done Storm King. I haven't progressed through them enough to gain boons. Storm King I haven't. I've been just progressing to unlock the MSBA, Fangbreaker and all that stuff. So I haven't gone through the boon side yet, but we can run through them here really quick. Do the 2% lifesteal severity and the hit points. I would do stamina gain, just because it seems like when you need to hop around is when your stamina is depleted, and having that extra stamina gain is always nice. And then this one's kind of a toss-up. For this build, I would probably do the recovery. Because, like I said, it's a little bit low, and getting higher recovery increases how fast you get out those encounter powers. So, and then this one is still kind of a toss-up as well. You could do the max HP, or you could do the added damage. It's kind of a toss-up. So, and let's see. And yeah, we'll probably do Chill in Winter. When striking a foe, you gain a stack. When at 10 stacks, you release all stacks, and you deal up to 14,000 damage to the targets closest to you. The only bad thing is that damage over a time effects will not trigger this ability. So, which would be severely OP, because we would just be going, popping off 14,000 bursts of damage constantly because of how often they hit. So that's basically each strike from a power from an at will. So it's the first strike, which is not that hard to attain. I mean, control wizards, you basically hold down right trigger and hit your buttons. So you're constantly doing attacks, so it's not that hard to attain. And then Cloaked Ascendancy. For this build, I'm going to do Aura of Hope to boost everyone's action point gain. And then critical severity is always nice, and especially when it's put up against incoming healing. That's not very effective. And now this one is kind of the toss-up, which in my mind I'm going to do recovery, because I can supplement bigger chunks of lifesteal from other places than with just this boon, and taking the recovery is nice. And then Aberrant Power is pretty much the only one that makes any sense. So it's the same thing as the Storm King boon. You build up stacks, and you deal 10,000 damage to nearby targets, or 20,000 damage to aberrant creatures. And again, damage over time effects will not trigger this ability. So each first strike of each power. In companions, I kind of got a hodgepodge right now, but it's effective for me, and they're not all epic, they're not all legendary. Like I said, I'm nowhere near max item level, but this build works and it's great. I have 2 max item level great weapon fighters that say that they love my Master of Flame build, and that was even before this most recent respec of going full buff instead of the half DPS, half buff build that I was running before. I haven't run with them within the last 2 weeks since this respec, but I sent them both a message before I made this video, and so hopefully should be getting a response pretty soon. Companions here. So Earnest of Belial, I'm planning to take that up to epic to get the 10% critical severity, and I've actually switched to a melee bonding companion, because your melee bonding companions, well, any companion gets a slight buff from clerics. So if your bonding companion gets hit by Divine Glow, if your bonding companion gets hit by AA, they do get a stat increase, which means more stats for you, because when their bonding's proc, it's procking off the stats that they have at the time. So if you're running a Fire Archon, sometimes they are outside of the buff area, so you're not gaining those increased stats. And with my mercenary as a legendary, he does not die very often, so he can stay in the fight. And it seems like right when I think he's about to die, he does like his dashing strike, so he goes behind the enemy, and then he heals himself pretty much, or gets healed by me, or gets healed by the cleric, because even he gets chaotic growth. Your companions get pretty much everything that a player gets, just at a diminished rate. So he gets chaotic growth so he can heal himself. He gets fury so he hits a little bit harder. He gets, nexus so he hits even more hard. It's crazy how it all works. But that's why I switched to a melee companion, because he does receive buffs from the cleric. So I do have the Fire Archon, which is mostly for the boss burn, so dealing that 50% or 5% more damage below 50% health. And then this was a gamble, which, even though they fixed it, quote unquote, it still procs. I mean, you can keep it up constantly, so every 5 seconds that thing is going off, especially with the cooldown reduction that we have from the lightning. You can keep that up pretty much constantly. And let's see, the Air Archon. I would love for this to be higher, but at the same time, it's such a minuscule damage increase that it's not top priority. My top priority is getting that Earnest of Belial leveled up. And then most likely I'll probably take my Fire Archon to Epic after that. Just because it'll jump from 2 to 3 or 4%, and whereas my Fire Archon's going to go from 5 to 7. I know that for sure. So that's like third on my list right now. So that's why I'm running that. Mounts, I am running a power mount as well as the power boon from the guild. I do not have any legendary mounts, so I don't have legendary mount powers, but I'm using Berserker's Rage. When you're at full action points, percentage of your armor pen, you gain a percentage of your armor pen as power. And insignia bonuses do not change with your loadout, so that's why these are all kind of set to damage, because I don't want to have to swap back and forth. And then Magistrate's Patience, when a critical strike applies a damage over time, so this is even more DOT for us. And then Decreased Defense, Deflection, and Lifesteal to increase your power. After controlling an enemy, gain combat advantage damage. So we do at times control enemies because we get them frozen, or we slow them with our chill stacks and things like that. So, and then on top of everything else, if on the slightest chance that our feats did not proc to give combat advantage, we're giving combat advantage this way. And then obviously Wanderer's Fortune. It is double refinement this weekend, so definitely running Wanderer's Fortune to try and maximize as much as I can to get things leveled up. But other than that, guys, that's all from me. I want to thank you all for watching and supporting me. Check out the description below this video to get more info about me and my Gaming to Greatness team. Any comments, questions, or concerns, comment below the video. You can message me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The links are in my channel, and they will also be in the description of this video. And as usual, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.